Lilith, a name that echoes like a curse and a prophecy at once. Who is she? A demon who strangled newborns in their cradles? The first feminist rebel? The mother of monsters? Or is she simply a mirror of what societies fear most in women? Today, let's unravel her story. A tale older than the Bible. One that wins through clay tablets and whispered folklore, past medieval spells, occult grimoires, feminist manifestos, and your favorite TV shows. Lilith is no single monster. She's an idea that shapeshifts to fit every era's anxieties and dreams. In this video, we'll dig deep, far deeper than a Wikipedia summary. We'll explore archaeology, ancient religion, folklore, mysticism, psychology, art, and pop culture. Because to understand Lilith is to understand how we define evil and how we define women. So grab your protective amulets, your skeptic's notebook, or your occult grimoire, whatever you need. We're going straight to the roots. Our story doesn't begin in the Bible at all. It begins in the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago. Here, people feared the wind at night, not just for its chill, but for what it carried: illness, spirits, death. Among these spirits were the Lilith male wind demons. Their name is the oldest ancestor of Lilith. They weren't just nightmare fuel. They were part of daily life. Archaeologists have found protective spells on clay tablets invoking gods to keep these demons at bay. "O gods, keep the Lilith away from my house. May she not steal the child from my womb." They blamed miscarriages, sudden infant death, and postpartum infections on these spirits. It's grim, but also human. When medicine fails, we reach for myth. In Babylonian texts, Lilith weren't lone operators. They had a whole hierarchy. Ardit Lili, spirit of the unmarried dead woman. Lilu, male counterpart, sometimes a seducer. Lilitu, the dangerous seductress or child snatcher. These weren't morality tales in the modern sense. They were explanations for cruel randomness. Imagine being a mother in ancient era. Your child is healthy one day and dead the next. Medicine can't explain it, but the Lilith can. Scholars have found spells that are shockingly personal. For example, she who flies in through the window at night. She who brings fever to infants. It's not hard to see how these spirits were both fearsome and necessary. They gave shape to dread. The iconography also emerges in the archaeological record. We see amulets depicting winged female figures with bird talon traits that will follow Lilith all the way to the Renaissance. One of the most famous is the so-called Burney relief, also called the Queen of the Night relief. A nude woman with wings, bird's feet, and flanked by owls. Scholars debate if it's Lilitu, Ishtar, or Ereshkigal. But the visual vocabulary is clear: female sexuality plus wings plus predator. Over time, these spirits became more standardized in magic spells. By the Assyrian period c. 800 BCE, anti-demonic amulets were mass-produced. They featured inscriptions begging gods to protect pregnant women and infants from Lilith attacks. Let's pause here. Why do these myths exist? It's easy to mock them. But these people lived in a world without vaccines, antibiotics, or even germ theory. Infant mortality rates could be 3,050%. The Lilith weren't just monsters, they were explanations. They were a technology of belief. We also see an early connection between female sexuality and danger. The Lilith seduced men in dreams, causing impotence or nocturnal emissions, and stole babies. They were, quite literally, the fear of women's power over life. Sound familiar? That motif will follow Lilith for 4,000 years. It's also critical to realize that there wasn't one official myth. The Mesopotamian world was a stew of city-states with their own variations. Sometimes Lilith were minor spirits. Sometimes they were serious threats. Sometimes they blurred into other demons. But they always occupied that liminal space. The threshold between life and death. The window between safety and danger. The boundary between desire and terror. In many ways, Lilith is the oldest example of weaponized fear of women. She's an embodiment of the threats a patriarchal society saw in female independence and sexuality. This is not to say the ancient Mesopotamians thought of it in those terms. They weren't writing feminist critiques, but their fears reveal their values. It's not so different from horror movies today. We invent monsters to warn us. Don't go there. Don't do that. Don't trust her. When people think Lilith, they often imagine a single story, Adam's first wife who refused to submit. But that version is only one thread in a tangled, centuries-old tapestry. First, let's clear up a misconception. Lilith doesn't appear in the Hebrew Bible in any detailed narrative. There's only one famous mention in Isaiah 30:14. Wildcats shall meet with hyenas, goat demons shall call to each other, there to Lilith shall repose, and find herself a resting place. That's it. No origin story. No rebellion against Adam. Just a cryptic reference in a prophecy about desolation. Scholars debate the meaning of the word in Hebrew. Some say it's borrowed from the Akkadian Lilith spirits. Others think it just means night creature. But Jewish tradition is nothing if not creative. As Jewish literature evolved, so did Lilith. The Dead Sea Scrolls 2nd century BCE, 1st century CE contain references to female demons called Liliths, plural, lurking in the desert. Later, the Talmud 3rd-6th century CE gives her more shape. She becomes a single demon with recognizable traits. She has wings. She seduces men in dreams. She births countless demonic offspring. She is especially dangerous to newborns. One Talmudic passage even tells men to recite protective formulas before sleeping, lest Lilith cause them to have nocturnal emissions of spiritual danger, because those emissions would spawn demonic children. Sexual anxiety? Check. Fear of infant mortality? Check. We see the same themes from Mesopotamia, but more moralized. Medieval Jewish communities took Lilith very seriously. Archaeologists have found protective amulets from around the 6th-8th centuries CE with inscriptions like, "Out Lilith. Begun. May this woman and her child be guarded from all harm." These amulets were placed in homes, on cradles, or even around women's necks. The threat was personal. Losing a child in infancy wasn't abstract. But the most famous version of Lilith's story didn't appear until the alphabet of Ben Sira, a medieval text probably composed between the 8th and 10th centuries CE. It's not part of the Bible. It's not Talmudic law. It's more of a satirical or folkloric collection. But it contains the first full telling of Lilith as Adam's first wife. Here's the short version. God creates Adam and Lilith from the same clay. They quarrel because Lilith refuses to lie beneath Adam during sex. She demands equality, saying they were made from the same earth. When Adam insists on dominance, Lilith pronounces the ineffable name of God and flees. She settles by the Red Sea and mates with demons. God sends angels to retrieve her, but she refuses to return. As punishment, 100 of her children will die every day. She, in turn, vows to attack newborn human infants unless protected by amulets inscribed with the angels' names. The alphabet of Ben Sira isn't canonical. It's not scripture. It's folkloricy, humorous, a little scandalous. But it became the defining Lilith myth, because it solved a theological puzzle. Genesis has two creation stories. Genesis 1:27 says God created man and woman simultaneously. Genesis 2 says God made Eve from Adam's rib. How do you reconcile that? Lilith became the answer, the woman made at the same time, who refused submission and was replaced by the obedient Eve. It's a brilliant piece of Midrash interpretive storytelling. But it's also telling. Lilith isn't just a demon. She's a woman who said no. In a patriarchal religious culture, that's the ultimate sin. Notice the moral logic. She demands equality give she's cast out. She becomes sexually uncontrolled give she spawns demons. She refuses to obey if she murders children. It's a cautionary tale with teeth. These beliefs weren't just stories. Medieval Jews feared Lilith enough to carve protective angel names into household objects. Mothers in labor might wear amulets. Cradles might bear inscriptions to ward her off. The power of the story wasn't in the text. It was in daily life, in how people tried to control birth, sex, and death through ritual. At the same time, Lilith was an oddly necessary figure. Because if she was a demon who killed babies, there was at least an explanation. It wasn't that God was unjust. It wasn't that life was cruel. It was her. By the late medieval and Renaissance periods, Lilith had crossed from Jewish folklore into the wider European imagination. She didn't just stay a Jewish demon lurking in childbirth amulets. She evolved into a key figure in Western occultism, ceremonial magic, and demonology. It's important to remember that medieval Christian scholars were obsessed with categorizing demons. They compiled grimoires manuals for summoning, banishing, and commanding spirits. Texts like the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic 15th century or the Lesser Key of Solomon's 17th century list and rank demons with elaborate hierarchies. Lilith begins to appear in these lists. She isn't just a Jewish nightmare anymore. She's universalized. By the Renaissance, Lilith becomes part of the European demonological canon, often labeled as a succubusa female demon who seduces men. Why? Because European demonology needed a female face for sexual temptation. Theologians from Augustine to Aquinas debated whether demons could have sex with humans. The answer was a terrified yes, but it's evil. Succubi were blamed for men's erotic dreams, impotence, or even death by exhaustion. Lilith, already described in Talmudic lore as seducing men in their sleep, fit perfectly. In these texts she often appears not just as Lilith, but as Lamia, Impusa, or other classical female monsters. Demonologists weren't too picky about merging traditions. They blended Jewish Lilith, Greek Lamia, child-eating monster, Roman Striga witches. It all became one demonic feminine archetype. Some Renaissance occultists went further. They wanted to summon her, not to banish but to use her. Magic manuals taught how to command spirits good or evil for personal gain. You might call on Lilith for erotic visions, compelling a lover's desire, gaining occult knowledge. Of course, these texts were equally careful to warn. Beware, sick spirits deceive. They will destroy your soul. It was attraction and revulsion. In the Ars Goetia part of the Lesser Key, Lilith doesn't appear by name in the famous 72 demons list. But later occultists often treated her as a demonic queen, sometimes pairing her with Asmodeus, the demon of lust. In Kabbalistic demonology, she even becomes the consort of Samouth, angel of death and accuser. They're a kind of infernal couple, the mirror image of Adam and Eve. Meanwhile, Jewish Kabbalah itself was evolving. By the 13th century, Kabbalistic texts gave Lilith a bigger role in their cosmic drama. She wasn't just a demon attacking babies. She was the embodiment of unholy sexuality, the Qliphoth husks, or shells that block divine light. Lilith is the sexual force unbalanced, severed from holiness. This symbolism was complex. On one level, she was the reason for sexual sin. On another, she was necessary to explain evil's persistence in the world. Kabbalists mapped entire demonic worlds. Qliphoth, Sphersa, and Lilith was a queen in these dark realms. This idea profoundly influenced later Western occultists. 19th and 20th century ceremonial magicians, like those in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or Aleister Crowley's circles, borrowed Jewish Kabbalah. But they reinterpreted it. They saw Lilith not just as an enemy, but as a gateway to forbidden knowledge. In their systems, the Tree of Life is the divine order. The Qliphoth are its inverse, its shadow. Lilith is a key initiatory figure in the Qliphoth. Traversing the tree's dark side was dangerous but promised power. Crowley, for example, often wrote about succubi, sexual magic, and demonic feminine forces. Though he didn't always name Lilith directly, the archetype was there. The seductive, devouring, independent female demon was too potent to ignore. Meanwhile, in art and literature, Lilith was undergoing yet another transformation. She wasn't just a demon. She was becoming the ultimate femme fatale. Painters like John Collier depicted her as an impossibly beautiful nude woman with a serpent. Poets like Dante Gabriel Rossetti wrote, "Lilith, the first wife, she who drew Adam with her sweet tongue and soft body, no longer a monstrous baby killer. Now she was dangerously seductive." This evolution is striking. For rabbis, she was an infant killer. For medieval Christians, a succubus. For Renaissance magicians, a spirit to summon or command. For romantics, a symbol of dangerous female beauty. She went from feared to desired. It wasn't just misogyny. It was fascination. Western occultists didn't simply want to banish Lilith. They wanted to understand her, or even become her. The idea of Lilith as an independent, defiant, sexual female demon survived precisely because she embodied everything mainstream religion feared and therefore obsessed over: sex, rebellion, knowledge, death. Lilith was not forgotten. She was transformed. Lilith's journey didn't end with dusty grimoires or Renaissance magic circles. By the 20th century, she was reborn again, this time, not as a demon to be feared or summoned, but as a symbol of women's liberation. It's the 1960s and 70s. Second-wave feminism is challenging patriarchy in law, work, family, and culture. Activists want new symbols, new myths, and Lilith, a figure of female rebellion, sexual autonomy, and refusal to submit, fits perfectly. The feminist reimagining of Lilith starts with a simple observation. Why was Lilith demonized in the first place? The answer feminists gave was, because she refused to be sexually subservient. Because she wanted equality with Adam. Because she walked away rather than obey. That sin was no sin to feminists, it was heroism. This reinterpretation wasn't random. It deliberately turned the old patriarchal warning upside down. Fear Lilith as the dangerous woman, embrace Lilith as the free woman. This idea spread in feminist circles through essays, poems, and eventually, entire publications. In 1976, Jewish feminists in the US launched Lilith magazine. It was and still is a serious feminist Jewish journal, named to reclaim Lilith as a symbol of resistance. Its first issue declared, "We chose Lilith as our symbol precisely because she has been so thoroughly demonized." Lilith became a muse for visual artists, poets, and novelists. She was no longer the baby killer. She was the woman who wouldn't lie beneath Adam. The one who said no, the one who left Eden on her own terms. Lilith became a figure women could identify with. Unapologetic sexual agency? Lilith. Refusing unjust authority? Lilith. Facing demonization for defiance? Lilith. The message was, if you think I'm a witch, fine, I'll be a witch on my own terms. This feminist Lilith wasn't only academic or literary. She entered pop culture. Musicians, comic book writers, and filmmakers picked her up. In the 1990s, Sarah McLachlan launched the Lilith Fire, a massively successful all-women's music festival. Why the name? Lilith was Adam's first wife, who refused to be subordinate. That's the spirit. Writers like Angela Carter, Judith Plasko, and Enid Dame reimagined Lilith in poetry and prose. Judith Plasko's The Coming of Lilith 1972, a groundbreaking midrash retelling where Lilith and Eve meet outside Eden and become allies rather than rivals. In Plasko's version, the classic blame the other woman dynamic is undone. Lilith and Eve recognize they've both been trapped in patriarchal stories. Today, the feminist Lilith lives on in digital culture. She's invoked in hashtags, memes, and online communities. For many women, Lilith represents sexual freedom. anger at patriarchy, rejection of purity politics, embrace of the bad woman label on their own terms. Lilith functions as a counter-myth. Myths are powerful cultural scripts. By retelling them differently, feminists claim power over the narrative itself. This is myth-making as activism. Interestingly, Jewish feminists didn't just reinterpret Lilith as a symbol. They also created new rituals around her. Because Lilith was traditionally blamed for killing infants, Jewish families in the past used amulets and incantations to keep her away. Modern rituals do the opposite. They invite her in. Some Rosh Chodesh new moon groups hold Lilith circles. Participants read feminist midrash about Lilith. They celebrate her as the foremother of female autonomy. For these groups, reclaiming Lilith is spiritual healing. It's about transforming a figure of fear into one of empowerment. This reclamation also raises tough questions. Are we whitewashing Lilith by ignoring her older demonic traits? Does it flatten her complexity? Or is this the whole point of myth, reinventing it to serve new needs? Some critics argue that in turning Lilith into a pure hero, we risk losing the messy, subversive power of the original. After all, even in her older forms, Lilith embodied real fear about women's sexuality and independence. She was never safe, never tame. This is precisely why many contemporary artists and writers love her. They don't want to make her nice. They want her wild, ambiguous, defiant. A figure who forces us to confront cultural anxieties about women who won't submit. Lilith is the patron saint of difficult women, and that's why she matters. Lilith today is more than a demon or a goddess. She's a mythic container way to think about power, sexuality, resistance, and blame. She holds all the contradictions. For thousands of years, her story has been retold over and over. As monster, as demon lover, as satanic queen, as feminist icon. That's her power. She survives because she changes, because she refuses to be only one thing, just like the women who invoke her name. Lilith is not just a character from myth, she's a mirror. For thousands of years, she has reflected what cultures fear, desire, condemn, or secretly admire about female power. From ancient Mesopotamia, where she was a wind spirit or disease-bringing demon, to Jewish folklore, where she was the terrifying baby killer and Adam's rebellious first wife, to Renaissance demonologies and magical grimoires that sought to name and control her, to modern feminist movements that claimed her as a symbol of defiance and freedom. These transformations weren't accidents. They reveal how stories adapt to the anxieties and needs of each era. Patriarchal cultures turned Lilith into a monster to warn women against independence. Male occultists tried to summon her for forbidden knowledge or erotic power. Feminists reclaimed her as a heroine who refuses subjugation. Lilith shows that myths aren't static. They're alive. They can oppress, but they can also liberate. For many today, Lilith isn't about choosing between evil or good. She's about complexity. She refuses easy categorization, demon and victim, destroyer and creator, monster and mother, outcast and icon. She embodies the anger of women whose voices were silenced. She stands for sexual autonomy in a world that punishes it. She dares to be blamed, to be feared, to be free. Even the old protective amulets tell us something important. Cultures feared Lilith precisely because they needed to imagine a woman who broke the rules. The amulets weren't just protection. They were admissions. We know she exists in our imagination. We have to keep her out. Today, reclaiming Lilith is a way to refuse that exclusion. It's saying, the thing you feared, that's me, and I'm not sorry. In the end, Lilith endures because she speaks to something fundamental. The fear of women who won't obey, the allure of the forbidden, the power of rewriting your own story. She is older than any one religion, stronger than any one meaning, and she's not going away.